Moving on to topic 8, cell order and energetics. So topics 8 and 9, by the way, are kind of short, and mostly it's some definitions, because we want to talk about respiration and photosynthesis. And so this is kind of, let's get into talking about respiration and photosynthesis. And so let's talk about these things. So first I wanted to show you this video. It's going to play. This is called The Inner Life of a Cell. I'll play this for you. And this is one of these videos. It was made at Harvard University, actually, and it's called The Inner Life of a Cell. And what they did was they took a bunch of cell biologists, and they collaborated with a computer company, and they wanted to, make a video about what is going on in a cell. And they wanted to make it accurate to what the structures look like and all that. And so I want to point out a few things. There's a narrated version of it that explains what's going on, but you can see phospholipids. If you watch carefully, you're going to see there's the cytoskeleton. You're going to see motor proteins and all sorts of interesting things. And you're at a level now where you're not going to understand everything that's going on there, but you should see some things that you recognize. Look at that. There's some cytoskeleton. I'll point out a few things as we go along. So there's some more cytoskeleton. Those are actin fibers. There's some microtubules. And there is a motor protein, and it looks like it's moving a vesicle. So up in the top right, looks like a mitochondria. In the middle left, that was a centrosome. So what you're seeing are some ribosomes and some messenger RNA, and they are synthesizing something, and I think they're synthesizing it into the endoplasmic reticulum. So there's the ER. I think we're going to see some vesicles bud off here in a moment. There's our vesicle, close-up view. There's the Golgi. And we have some exocytosis going on, it looks like. I'm going to stop it there. It's mostly what I wanted to show you, because I do want to move on and get through this lecture. Like I said, we have a lot of definitions here. And hopefully most of these things you've seen somewhere before. And it's mostly to get us up to the language so that we can talk about respiration and photosynthesis. So we're going to talk about metabolic pathways, right? And so what does that mean? The word metabolism really is just referring to chemical reactions, right? We talk about boosting our metabolism and those kind of things all the time. And what does that mean? It means we're trying to speed up our reactions because we want to, presumably lose some weight or something like that. So metabolic pathway is where we have one product, it is converted to several other products. And so respiration and photosynthesis are this kind of thing. It's like a chain reaction that one thing leads to the other, which leads to the other, and so on. And a bunch of enzymes are involved. So you can break these things down into two types of reactions. We can talk about catabolic reactions, and we can talk about anabolic reactions. So catabolic means we're breaking something down and we're releasing energy. So the example there you can see is breaking down glucose and creating carbon dioxide and water and releasing energy. Anabolic is the exact opposite. So if you think about somebody who's taken anabolic steroids, they want to build something, they want to build muscle. Anabolic is the opposite. It's going to require energy to build something bigger. So like I said, we're going to talk about energy and things like that. So somebody's asking, if your metabolism is fast and you don't gain weight as fast as someone with slower metabolism, does that mean the enzymes will work faster? I think that's a very complicated question because, there's a lot of things that we don't understand in terms of, what's going on with metabolism and things like that. you know, I mean, in terms of if you look at hormones and how, you know, age, gender, all those kind of things will affect how your metabolism works and how you respond. The reality is, you know, if you're trying to, let's say, build muscle or something like that, you know, then you have to, obviously, you have to work out, consume protein. Those kind of things are all going to help, and some people are better at than others. So that's kind of the short answer. Sorry, I can't give you a better answer at the moment. It's just very, very complex. So let's talk about energy. There's different types of energy. Here's some energy here up in the oil sands. And the type of energy we're going to talk about the most is right up here. So you can see we have potential energy. So potential energy means stored energy. And mostly in biology, we're thinking about potential energy stored in chemical bonds. But this here is sort of an analogy. You can see we've got this diver. He or she is at the top of the diving board. And so there's energy stored. The energy was stored when he or she climbed the ladder. It's converted into kinetic energy the moment he jumps off, and it turns into motion. So we can think of potential energy kind of like this. This is a good analogy. Like I said, it's stored in bonds. It's ready to be released. There's many kinds of energy we could talk about. Nuclear energy, photo energy, etc. But I want you to think of chemical bonds as potential energy. Some have more, so it's like the bowstring being pulled back far. Some have less. The bowstring is not pulled back very far. So chemical reactions, we also want to talk a little bit about thermodynamics, and I have a note for you here in a moment about thermodynamics. But let's talk about what thermodynamics are. You can see Homer Simpson is talking about thermodynamics, and I'll just play this for you quickly. Anyway, cute little thing there. So it says, what is thermodynamics? It's really trying to understand energy transformations. And I know you talk about these. I think it might be Chem 102, so that wouldn't be this semester. And you know, when you talk to them from a chemistry aspect, you know, this is the kind of thing they tell you. They tell you energy is neither created or destroyed, right? So take a look. There's a bear, and the bear is eating something. And he's not destroying the fish, he's converting the energy in the chemical bonds in the fish to new chemical bonds in the bear's body, right? So what I want to do, like I said, is write a quick note about thermodynamics here for you. And I want to call it thermodynamics for cells. So the first law of thermodynamics for cells is that cells cannot destroy energy, but they convert it between different forms. So for example, a plant cell might convert light energy to chemical energy. I will put a second law here in a moment, so I'll come right back to that. So hopefully you got that, but I will come right back to this. So that's the first law of thermodynamics. It just means that energy can be converted between different forms. Okay, don't worry about the destroying and all that. That's like physics and chemistry. That's not really that interesting to biology, but this is what biology is about, and this is what animals and cells and things like that do all the time. So what's the second law of thermodynamics? So once you take a look at this video here, there's a whole bunch of these on YouTube. This one is really cool. Somebody set out some strawberries, and they're doing one of those, you know, you take a photo every minute and then you turn it into a video over 24 or 48 hours or something like that. And you can see what's happening. Maybe you can see a little fly here or there, but the strawberries are breaking down. Let's put part way there. Just going to speed this up just a little bit. So in this case here, it's actually the mold is obviously breaking things down. If you didn't have the mold, they might just dry up instead. But this is what the second law of thermodynamics is about. It says here that energy transformation results in increasing entropy. So what is entropy? Entropy means disorder and randomness. I mean, Chem 102, you're going to talk about it. You're going to get a variable and all that. And but you know, it's not something that's necessarily useful to focus on in biology, which is why I'm giving you my cell biology laws of thermodynamics. So the second law, dynamics for cells, dynamics, that basically it takes energy to stay alive. What does that mean? It means cells must continually consume energy to keep themselves organized, and we'll say, and alive, right? So like those strawberries there, they're dead, they start breaking down, right? Obviously the fungi, the mold on there sped things up, but that's what it means to be alive. We have to continually take in energy because we're continually building things and transporting things across our membranes, and as animals, we're moving all the time, and if you can't do all of those things, we're going to die, right? So we continually need to take in energy. If you're a plant, you continually need the sun or you die, and so on. Like I said, from a thermodynamics perspective, that means we want to keep organized. We want to defeat entropy. We want to not be disordered. Okay, so hopefully everyone got that. I'm going to move back to the PowerPoint now. So I was hoping to get through this a little quicker, and mostly just a lot of definitions here. So there's some cells, or not cells, I mean organisms, and they're nice and organized, and you can see that other footnote about they cause disorder to their surroundings, which is not something I really want to talk about a lot, but you can read about it in the textbook in chapter 8. So there's a little cell metabolizing things, increasing order, and this is at the expense of its surroundings, which means it's food and things it's consuming. You know, you're consuming glucose and you're expelling it as carbon dioxide, which is more of a disordered molecule. So there's the first law, and there's our second law. You can see the bear is consuming energy and releasing much of it as heat. Okay, so a couple other things I want to define for you. Again, something I think is covered in Chem 102, not Chem 101. I'm not sure. But you may have seen it from high school. I certainly saw it when I went to high school, is this whole concept of free energy. So free energy is also referred to as the delta G. So delta means the change. G stands for a guy named Gibbs who defined it, so it was named after him. And it says this is a measure of a system's instability. So the change is the beginning and the end state. So there's a thermodynamics formula. Again, I think Chem 102, not too concerned about in this class. But let's take a look what I mean by change in free energy. So this is like potential energy, but free energy is actually the useful energy. Some energy we have as lost as heat. And so this is kind of just making that distinction of energy that is actually useful, right? When you break down a chemical bond, you don't capture all the energy. Only some of it is usable. So that's what the delta G is. So basically know that delta G means energy applied to chemical reactions. It's kind of the main thing to know for this class. So if you take a look on the first picture there, we have a diver, and the diver jumps down, converts his potential energy into kinetic energy. So he's losing energy as he jumps. So if you lose energy, your energy state is negative. So that means negative. And so I'm going to have a negative delta G. Second example there, you can see diffusion. You've got some molecules that are organized and then they become less organized. So they go from having energy to having less energy. So a negative delta G, the system is losing energy. You can see the last reaction, which is a bit more relevant to what we're talking about. When we break things down, we release energy, so the system loses energy, so you get a negative delta G. So back to my notes for a second. I'm going to write some of that down in the notes. I know that was a lot of talking, and so we want to, kind of think about this straight for a second, okay? So if, I've got to find the delta symbol. I think I have it here somewhere. There it is. So if the delta G is negative, so what does this mean? The delta G is negative. So this means system is releasing energy. You could also think of it as losing energy. This also means that the reaction is thermodynamically favorable. And you'll talk a little bit more about that in chemistry, but it just means that the reaction can occur, right? It's kind of like, you know, you're on your skateboard and you're at the top of a hill. You can just go, right? You don't need to push with your foot, maybe a tiny bit just to get started, but you're ready to go. If you're at the bottom of the hill, that would be a different story in general. So that's what I kind of want you to know. Maybe I'll put one other note in saying, usually these are catabolic reactions. Remember, catabolic means we're breaking something down. So like breaking down glucose is a catabolic reaction. If delta G is positive, so let's get that delta again. Delta G is positive. What does that mean? Basically the opposite of all that stuff I just said above. So this means the reaction, can't seem to line that up in the same place. The reaction requires energy. And the footnote we could put for that, for cells, this we could say usually in the form of ATP. Not always, but that's kind of something that happens. We often use ATP to get that energy. The other thing we could say is usually this is an anabolic reaction. And I could say it's not energetically favorable, but you know what? With a little ATP, we can make anything happen. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some things, and you're going to see some numbers for delta G's. And then now you know how to interpret this. If it's negative, releasing energy. Positive requires ATP. That's how I want you to think about this. Okay, I'm going to skip through a few slides. Like I said, I kind of want to make sure I get to a couple of things here before the end. Sorry, I'm a little slower than I anticipated. I guess I talked about the midterm a little longer than I meant to. But here's two reactions, right? Metabolism of glucose. You can see it has a negative delta G of minus 2,800 joules per mole, right? Sometimes you might use the word exergonic. Exer means outside, gonic means energy. So it's releasing energy to the outside. Photosynthesis is the opposite. It's anabolic, it's endergonic, it's requiring energy from delta G.
Sir, you're still on the document.
Oh, am I? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, there we go. So here's the two examples. Glucose minus delta G, releasing energy. Photosynthesis plus delta G requires energy. Like I said, these other terms you can use, you can say exergonic or endergonic. Gonic means energy, ex means out, end means in. So make sure you know this. I always have, midterm 2, I always have at least one multiple choice question that says, what does delta G of minus something mean, or something like that? And then, you know, you're looking for one of these words. Is it endergonic, exergonic? You know, maybe they'll say something about free energy. So you got to know these words to get the mark for that particular reaction that I'm going to have in the on the midterm. Okay, I kind of said all that. So here's a sample multiple choice. We can try this one out. So it says we have a positive delta G value. And okay, we've got to read all the answers here. It says the reaction will release 2,800 kilojoules per mole. I'm looking at E. I know that that one is a negative delta G because it's releasing energy. The reaction will be exothermic. That's also a negative delta G. The reaction will require an enzyme. Well, most reactions require an enzyme, so I don't know how that's relevant. The reaction will be spontaneous. So that means energetically favorable, and that will be negative delta G as well. So that means that D is the correct answer. Requires energy. By definition, just what we said. Again, you know, this chapter is, hopefully it's mostly chemistry review for you. You can go in the textbook and you can take a look. You can show what they're showing here is the reactants in a negative delta G. The one on the left is going from having lots of potential energy to less potential energy. So that means it's losing energy. So energy is released. Positive delta G on the right, gaining energy. Energy is inputted into the system. So it's a way of understanding what is going on with our chemical reactions. Okay, so I'm just going to skip that. I want to talk a little bit about ATP and finish up today. So here's back to our cell, and we were talking about this whole concept that we have to continually be consuming energy and nutrients if we want to stay alive, we want to stay organized. And so there's our little cell. It's bringing in nutrients, it's bringing in energy and releasing waste products, and some energy is getting released as heat. So it's making its surroundings more disordered or giving entropy to its surroundings, if you want to use the chemistry words. So let's take a look at this in a bigger context, okay? Just want to kind of, throw down some things that we've talked about, right? So we've talked about nutrients, right? We've talked about all our macromolecules. We do eat nucleic acids, we're just not getting a lot of energy from them, so they're kind of not relevant as food sources. Our main food sources as animals are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. If you're a plant, your main energy source, of course, is going to be light energy, and there's a variety of other things that can be used if you're some sort of a lithotroph, which is some bacteria are consuming things like iron and whatnot. So the main one, since we're an animal, we want to look at these. We're consuming nutrients, we're bringing in energy, and we can't just, use every possible thing, right? It's kind of like if you have a Samsung phone and you have an iPhone, and think about all the phones that used to exist, right? We can't just have all these different molecules that we're using as energy. So everything gets oxidized and consumed and turned into ATP. Some of the chemistry in those carbohydrates, fats, and proteins is going to be used to make new carbohydrates, fats, proteins, nucleic acids, and other molecules. And we're also and some of the carbons and all those things are going to get stored in chemical bonds and waste products and heat. So I think the one thing that's missing from this slide is that some of the energy is used for something called cellular work. And these are things that we've talked about already. What do I mean by cellular work? Well, some of it is literal work. We're moving our muscles. We're moving things across membranes. And there's a few other things I want to talk about, which I think are going to come back after the break. So I don't want to cover everything. Like I said, I mostly want to talk about ATP and then call it a day. So let's talk about ATP for a minute. I've shown this molecule to you a few times. This part over here, we've got a nitrogenous base, adenine, and we have a ribose, that's a carbohydrate. So this together is adenosine, has its own name. So the full name is adenosine triphosphate. You can see we have 3 phosphates. And I think I mentioned before, I look at this as a chemist and I see tons and tons and tons of oxygens, whole bunch of negative charges, and I know there's a lot of potential energy there. If you want to get negative charges together, negative charges don't like to be together. They want to be with a positive charge. So you get all those negative charges together, and to do so, you have to, it takes energy to do that. So I know that's kind of like the bowstring being pulled back, and what you have is a lot of potential energy there. So ATP does have a lot of potential energy in those bonds. There's just kind of a little cartoon showing the ATP. And how do we get the energy? We break those bonds. And this is a hydrolysis reaction. So you can see there's water going in, it breaks it, and we get inorganic phosphate, and we get energy. So we're going to use a lot of energy. We're going to talk a lot about energy in the next few units. I think, let me just peek at the next slide here. This will be the last slide for today. And like I said, we're going to use that energy for quite a number of things. Some of this is cellular work that kind of makes sense. We're actually talking about work, we're moving things around. Another thing we're going to be using this energy for is something I'm going to talk about after the break, but we're going to use ATP for something called energy coupling. And this is something that I did talk about already, just saying that sometimes if we want to build things up, like we want to take some amino acids and we want to make proteins out of them, we need ATP. And that's what energy coupling is all about. And that's where most of the ATP is actually going to, as building things anabolically. Okay, so like I said, stopping there. Glad I'm done early for today. It's Friday. I want you to have a great weekend. Hopefully you can see your midterm grades. And like I said, if you have some concerns, you can set up a meeting with me, and we can certainly go over the meeting. Go over the midterm, and we can talk about that. Other than that, have a great weekend. Hopefully you'll enjoy your meals, and if you have a Thanksgiving meal, and I'm certainly looking forward to a long weekend. I could use one every week, but I'll take them when I get them. So take care, and I'll see you later.